So now we have the panel coming up, challenges of the European AI ecosystem, probably closely interlinked to what Björn already started us off with. Olli Salzmann will be the moderator? Oh no.
Not Olli Salzmann.
Florian Schütz. Sorry. Vanessa Cann on stage, please. Joanna, Bryson. André Loesekrug-Pietri and Olli Salzmann, probably.
Where do you want to sit?
Oh.
I think there's one. Perfect. Take a seat. Perfekt, Service, ja. Sind zu viele. Danke. Nö, das passt.
Very nice diversity. So, thank you for the introduction and a warm welcome from my side. A special welcome to the three panelists, Vanessa, André, and Joanna. I'm really looking forward to discussing the challenges of the European AI ecosystem with you today. My name is Florian. I'm managing director of the previously mentioned KI Park, an open AI ecosystem that was founded in October of last year and that has the mission to strengthen collaboration within the European AI scene to bring AI application that's engineered in Germany and Europe. And the one that has its opening event on Friday that you've been all invited to 5 minutes ago. And if you want the last minute invitation, you can contact me in the next break. To start our panel discussion, I would like to show only 2 slides of mine to give you an impression of my perspective on ecosystems. So the first thing I really want to say is we don't need ecosystems to develop AI technologies. And this could be quite bad news for someone like me who's paid to build up ecosystems. Next slide, please. But there is a but. And I don't have the presenter, so I can't click to the next slide. Oh, here it is. But AI strongly depends on ecosystems to develop real impact. And this is why. Please, the next slide, yeah. So if it's only about developing technologies, about the best research results, about having a new technology, a better chip maybe, that really can be done without ecosystems. Developing technology is possible by a startup, by a single person, by a researcher, by a research organization, by a large company. Everyone can develop technologies on their own. But what if it's not about developing technologies only, but really making big changes? Big changes like using AI for the healthcare of the future, using AI for the mobility of the future, changing the way production is done in a sustainable way. These are really the big changes we want to use AI for. And therefore, you need to have a collaboration within the ecosystem, because it's not about the technology only, it's not about the products, about the services or solutions, but you have to take into consideration the societal values. You have to take into consideration the habits of users, the political regulation, maybe the political funding you need to develop some things, the business models and the use cases, the infrastructure, the data, the capital, the talents, the skills that need to develop at the end users in society and in industry too. And so this is why ecosystems are very important to bring AI into really impact and effect. So now I got this, but I don't know how to use it. Next slide. I try to, okay. And this is my last slide. So today I want to talk with you about the European AI ecosystem. I want to talk about the characteristics of our government, society, academia and industry ecosystem, what makes us in Europe and maybe also in Germany so special and so unique, and if it's everything a challenge or if there are also opportunities. So, and For the first thing, I would like to ask you three to introduce yourself again and your perspective on the European AI ecosystem.
Wait, so quickly through the three of us introduce?
Yeah.
Or do we do our perspective?
So I would like you to introduce yourself again to the audience and then give your perspective on the AI ecosystem. Right now.
All right, okay, sorry. Okay, hello, my name is Joanna Bryson. I'm a professor of ethics and technology at the Hertie School, but I have also been a developer like you. I've worked in startups, and I've worked in relatively large corporations. And I also was a computer science professor. I have a PhD in AI from MIT. And I'm here, I'm in Germany. And I want to say, I mean, just the people I met last night. I'm sorry I wasn't here this morning. I actually am supposed to be in Japan this week, but instead that all got made online because of COVID. So I'm attending another meeting in the mornings. But anyway, so many people here are showing that there is a vital innovative AI infrastructure in Berlin, in Europe. And so actually I wanted to really quickly show some slides that sort of contradicted some of the narratives that we've been hearing about the Cold War and the race about AI. Could I have my slides, please?
And I hand this over to
okay,
you. Maybe
you.
you know how to use it.
I hope so. The big green button, right? Is that, no? I can't have my slides. No. I think that's a no. Okay, so I can't get my slides. I don't know what's going on. All right. Okay, why don't I hand it on? Is this going to change later? Maybe I'll just pass it on and then we can come back to this. Well, I'll do. Okay, they disappeared, or you don't have the PDF? You don't know what happened. Okay, they just told me they did have them, so I'm very confused. Sorry, I asked whether they had them. Okay, so let's see. I have my laptop. Can I connect it? Well, I actually published a paper last year called The AI Cold War with Helena Malikova from the Director General of Competition. And a lot of people were circulating this meme of where you saw the top 20 platforms in the world. And most of them were in China, by which they meant Asia, actually Japan and Korea, who compete with China, and the United States. And so those are the two big clusters. And then there's a little tiny cluster, which is Europe, and then maybe even smaller cluster that's Africa, right? And so I was like, well, wait a minute. I thought that market concentration was a bad thing. Why are we only looking at the top 20? Why don't we look at the entire digital ecosystem? And she said, well, what even is a platform? How is this objective? I want to know everybody who's doing AI. So what we did was we looked at the WIPO, the international IP database for everyone who is doing in a particular category that related to model-based intelligent systems. And in that catalog, we found that actually China and the EU, and the EEA actually, were not that different from each other. They were actually more or less on par. But the other two pieces of news was that the US far outstripped the entire rest of the world on both the number of patents they published and also on the amount of market capitalization aggregated across every company that had put out at least 2 patents, okay? And then, so that was one piece. So there was not a binary Cold War. It wasn't that the EU was in danger of throwing, all of the AI into China. But secondly, the rest of the world, not counting China or the EU or the USA, actually had more than the EU and China combined, okay? Both in market capitalization and in IP. So that was the paper we published last year. This year, I've had a master's student look at more years and also go into more details. So she looked at even, oh, those are my slides. Okay, so that's the disinformation one I told you about, right? And here's the, so now this is log scale, okay? We all know this from COVID now, we get logs, right? So what you notice is not only that IP and market capitalization are more or less independent of each other, but also that some companies we know are innovative, like Apple, don't choose to use IP to defend their innovations, at least not using patents, I should say, to defend their innovations. And also, some companies that are highly innovative don't seem to choose to go for highly leveraged market capitalization strategies. So these are both strategies corporations take, and so these measures aren't perfect. But still, here's the complete version. So summing those up, that's the sum I just described to you. Now this was, like I said, we were doing this sort of nights and weekends, so Helena only looked at companies that had at least 2 patents. So this is what Wiebke did. This is from the year before, and now you see the EU is already doing even better if you look at every company that had even 1 patent, right? And now she's also highlighted Japan. Something weird is happening with Japan, watch this. Okay, here's the year that we had done. So you see that in 2019, actually, the EU is ahead of China, both in market capitalization and in IP. Now, this is what happened in 2021, okay? So something weird is going on with patents, and China and Japan are in some weird compete about this. The EU is still growing. This is still overall growth by the EU. And we know something weird is happening with market capitalization, what happened over COVID for these large tech companies, right? So it's pretty weird to try to make a claim with the measures I'm telling you to suspect both of them. But at least I hope you understand a lot is happening, and the digital is an enormous a leveler. Look at the rest of the world. A lot of people are finding ways to innovate and come in. So I don't think we should be feeling so threatened by America. I don't think we should believe the libertarian statements that America is saying about, oh, your regulation is slowing you down or holding you back. I don't think we're doing too badly there, and we have a good quality of life. And maybe it's not a great thing to have giant market capitalization companies in your country. Like I said, it doesn't seem to help you that much with IP. But we should realize, I think, that the main point is that we're in a situation that's highly, highly dynamic, and that the whole world has opportunities as well as us. Okay.
Thank you. So from your point of view, we are not as bad as we thought and heard. Why do you think, don't we know that? Why do you think, do we always focus on what we are bad at and not talking about what we are good at?
Well, there's sort of a celebrity aspect to this. So when we do have these really large companies, I mean, there's a real question. HP, who I notice is one of our hosts, but that's not why I bring this up. HP increased their value to stakeholders by 40% when they disaggregated. Why is it that Google and Microsoft and Facebook are so reluctant to disaggregate? They would also increase value. Everyone at YouTube is dying to get disaggregated out of Google, right? They think that their stocks are going to go through the roof. So why is this resistance? But I think part of it is that you get this celebrity status, you get invited to the table, you get on television, and people talk about you. And I think we don't notice this incredibly vital ecosystem around us. And what bothers me about that, I think in a way, who cares? It's almost like 2 different levels. If we're creating, that's great. But then people start trying to disrupt what makes Europe attractive. And so that's what I'm worried about.
Thank you, Joanna. Now I would like you, André, to introduce your perspective on our European AI ecosystem.
Yes, hello everybody. So the good news is I was instructed not to have any slides, so there won't be any slides, and there are no slides back there at the moderator. What I'm doing is we are building up the equivalent of DARPA in the US that was so eloquently presented this morning by Hans Oskereit. So an initiative, an agency for disruptive innovation, in order for Europe, for Germany, for France, for Europe to lead again in this technological century that we're experiencing. And why do we think it's important? Because we've realized that tech is not just an economic topic, but it's at the center of the way political opinions are created, the way our societies are structured, the way our healthcare situations are sorted, or crises are sorted out. And the second thing we do in order to do that, we run the largest deep tech ecosystem in Europe that helps us anticipate and ask the right questions. Because too often, and here I'm going to have a little segue to the question on why do we permanently think that we are bad? Because we are. I mean, just give you a few numbers. Last year, I'm going to expand that on technology and not just on AI, 23 launches of SpaceX, tree of Ariane. The cloud market share went down from 30 to 15% in 5 years, during the 5 years of the Macron presidency, but that's a total coincidence. We are relying on Intel to build the latest semiconductor plant 10 miles from here. So we are basically subsidizing with EU money, your money, the fact that Intel, which does not know how to do 5 nanometer chips, to do them. And we have no clue that they will succeed. I think it's a huge bet with our money that has the feeling that it's so. And why I am, despite everything I say, optimistic is because that's the beauty of tech. I don't know, I think it's live streamed. For those who are using Zoom, Zoom did not exist 2016. And today it's worth 3 times the value of all the airlines in the world, because Tesla is going to crush, probably continue to crush the traditional automakers, and it's worth twice the total market cap of all the automakers in the world. So the beauty of tech is that you can reshuffle the cards, but for that you need to project, anticipate, and that's where I get interested in AI, to answer your question, because AI, it's all about that. It's about the capacity to, in this fog, we speak about fog of war right now with Ukraine, but in this fog of information, with this incredible amount, I could use a log scale too, amount of information that we're receiving every day, which probably explains also why a lot of people feel disenfranchised in our societies. We need to understand what are the trends. So it's not the ultimate weapon, but it could allow us. And if on top of that the Europeans could use the diversity, maybe that's my idealistic hat, the diversity of our countries to feed into this model, the diversity of what Europe is about. And that we listen a little bit more to the Baltic states when they talk to us about Russia, that we listen a little bit more about the southern state when they talk about Africa, when we listen a little bit more about the Nordic countries when they talk about education, like Bjorn just alluded, because what he said about the Finns on AI is exactly the same thing happening on training of the young kids on disinformation, develop critical thinking. These are all European values. How do we transform them and leverage them in this technological century? And I think it's a beautiful European project. Last but not least, we've come to the conclusion that it's a political project. Frankly speaking, I hope Super Mario Brandenburg, who was there before, will save us all. But for the moment, I'm going to be very blunt. The political class has driven us into a fragmented world. I mean, we saw the 27 AI ecosystems, and then you hear these words in the Bundestag saying, aber dann finden wir den Schulterschluss zu Frankreich. That means, and then let's do our strategy, and then we'll try to find the connection. That's complete BS, because once you have a national strategy, it's incredibly difficult to then, because you will have a president and the enquête commission, and everybody has his little turf, and it's impossible to build something at scale. So that's why I commend what Vanessa and others are doing, because you try to build these large European models immediately at European scale. So Europe should not be in an ideology, but it should be the scale that we need for technology. So that's in a nutshell.
Okay,
and I hope to have a real discussion between us.
Thank you, André. My question would be, so we Germans tend to really admire the DARPA model, looking at the US, sometimes looking to Israel and thinking, oh, this is how radical innovation works. We are getting the results, we're seeing the results, and sometimes we say, yeah, but that's not how we Germans do things, that's not how we are. Is that different if you put it to a European level? So is the European collaborative ecosystem mentality okay for something like DARPA?
Yes, I personally am very much against this tendency of thinking, yes, but we are not risk takers. You saw the number of Germans, and I could add the number of French who got DARPA. It's not just Sebastian Thrun for Waymo and others, that suddenly you just need to build these Freiräume. But we have all these politicians, and sorry, it's not an anti-political speech that I'm doing, but we as citizens, we need as a civil society to step in and say, you cannot, Miss Merkel, but Mr. Scholz is saying the same, say deepfakes is a big danger, That was a Regierungsseminar in Meseberg 2018. And then when we come up and say, look, Facebook are the only ones who do put real money into deepfake detection, and we don't want Facebook becoming the Ministry of Truth, like in 1984. We will do that with a couple of researchers in TU München and in Cardiff and in Paris, and put $1 million at work. Oh, no, that's too complicated. So this, I mean, talk to Rafael Laguna. I personally came to the conclusion that it's hopeless to start with a government initiative. So that's why JEDI, a year and a half ago, we decided to set it up as a foundation, because we think it needs to be common good, but it needs to be outside. I mean, you can hope to change governments, but let's first focus on what is really important for us, is to lead, to make sure our values are embedded in the technology. This is why I gave you all these numbers, to show you that people talk about sovereignty, technology leadership, embedding our values, but in practical details. Do you know which is the city which uses the most CCTV in cameras and face recognition in Europe? London. But do you know which is the second city in terms of number of cameras to the number of inhabitants? It's Berlin. It's your nice city of Berlin. So we all think we love privacy, we are against authoritarianism and surveillance state. This is because we are not leading. So we are more and more, I mean, look at the pandemic. We are reactive. Look at Ukraine. We are reactive. We are faster than before in Europe, but we are shaped by what is happening outside. That's why this obsession about China and the US. If we shape the future, if we invent the technologies of the future, and not just the technologies, suddenly we take back control. Sorry for this reference to Brexit, but I think taking back control for citizens is a political project. So I think it's our role to say, okay, if we want that, then we really want to put our means, our money, our efforts where our words are. We are a little bit too much talkers. The real talkers are not in California. They are in Paris, Berlin, and especially in Brussels.
Okay, so Joanna wants to ask a question to you.
Well, yeah, I have a question to ask, but I first have to say I do not know the sense in which we were lagging on COVID. So, like, there were two countries, the U.S. and UK, who never exported any of their vaccine. And then there was like two countries that exported all of their vaccine and didn't protect their own people, India and China. And then there was the EU, who exported half their vaccine and kept half their vaccine. And Germany could have gone first, but they said, no, we want to keep the union together. And so we were all sort of matched for a long time until we got to a certain level of vaccination before we spread it. I think we showed incredible power and leadership, and we benefited the rest of the world. We sold a bunch of the vaccine we exported, but we also donated a bunch of it. I think we are in a leading position right now. I agree with you on the diversity part. I think it is really important and that is part of how we achieve things. It is also part of what makes us slow. And I've heard the Commission pitch us that way to Africa. They said, if you have an emergency, go to China. They can operate faster than we can. But if you want a lasting solution that's going to last because it will benefit your people and you, then come to us, because we're really good at crafting those kinds of things. And I think Airbus is a fantastic example of that. It was slow, it was insane, and now it's the best. And where would we be, given the problems Boeing has, if we didn't also have Airbus? So the question I was going to ask, though, and I honestly am exposing myself here, I don't know this, but in what sense is Tesla crushing their competition, except this really weird metric of market capitalization? I don't see that many Teslas around, but maybe I'm not aware that they're being sold at a higher rate than traditional cars.
My lens is completely focused on technology, and it's, as previous speaker showed it, it's only a very small part. So at the contrary, I believe that this political-driven technology policy, and it's over simplified, that you see in some Asian countries, and this technology for technology ideology that you see sometimes on the West Coast. I think the Europeans have probably a very interesting angle. tech for a certain purpose. So I'm only talking about the technology part. Well, just on Tesla, yes, you're completely right. Market cap is only one indicator, but unfortunately, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because when you have a market cap, you can acquire companies, you attract a lot of the best talent, and we saw that at work with the big tech platforms. I agree, a lot of people don't want anymore to work for the Googles, the Microsoft, but we should be careful because these guys are smart. When you see currently how Microsoft and Apple is riding the privacy wave that we invented, you know, it reminds me of, we invented 40 years ago the sustainable, you know, consciousness with the green movement, etc. Today, 99.7% of solar panels are built in China, and already 60% of our batteries. So it's great to have the right vision. It's better to implement it, and that's where I see. And on the vaccine, you're right and wrong, if I may say, at the same time. You're totally right on the fact that the EU, but Breton on that one is, I think, not totally fair, because he says we are the biggest exporters, so we sell our vaccines. But when you look at COVAX numbers, COVAX is the and for those interested, follow our Twitter feed, little advertising, because we do every month. Actually, the country that gives the most vaccines in proportion of what they use themselves is the US by far. And China is totally fake. They announced 3 billion of donations, and they gave, I don't remember the name now, but a couple percentage on that. I think Europe is at 50% of what they promised, and I think the US is almost at par. That means they used 600 million doses, and I think they gave 600 million doses. And I don't think it's because they are more humanistic than us, because they just realized that if there's a variant in Brazil or in South Africa, it will hit us back. We saw that happening. What I just want to say is that, you know, we have to think, I know it hurts me too, Donald Trump and his administration, because why do we have vaccines in 11 months? Because there was an operation called Warp Speed, which was managed by, I happen to have him as a friend, a former DARPA program manager, Colonel Matt Hepburn. You don't know this guy, but he was running this program between March and November 2020, where the US put 18 billion in 10 different projects. 2 of them bared fruit, Johnson & Johnson and Moderna. Yes, in parallel streams, we had BioNTech here in Germany, which is a great success for us.
And Oxford. And Oxford.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think this approach of saying, let's test several things. We know we are going to fail on something. Let's trust research. Let's only aim for excellence. This is something we need to change. I mean, do you know, we are going to invest, and I'm finishing on that, we are about to invest 750 billion euro in Europe for the so-called next generation Europe. Ursula von der Leyen is speaking about that Monday at noon, midday, and evening, and it's great. But we focus on the money. No, has ever somebody heard about precise KPIs? What do we want to achieve? The only KPI is 30% needs to go in digital, 25% in green, or the opposite. But we all know then you can basically justify any kind of project. A lot of this money will be wasted. We need to make sure we use that money. It's an exceptional historical moment. So this is what we are pushing for, and that's where I think these European ecosystems can really bring ideas, bring their energy, and probably also reconcile a little bit people with their political leadership.
Thanks, André. I hope you remember all to aim for excellence. Now I would like to ask Vanessa to introduce you and your perspective on our AI ecosystem and if we can compete with the rest of the world.
Sure. Thanks, Florian. And let me first say it's great to be here again on this big family reunion called Rise for AI after 2 years. It's great to see you all live and in real. And so my name is Vanessa Cann. I'm the managing director of the German AI Association, KI Bundesverband. We're 400 AI companies, so they're all focused on AI. 70% of their activity have to be in the field of AI. They all have their seat in Germany, and we're pushing very much, I think, in a similar direction as JEDI is, kind of towards a digital sovereign European Union, because we see it as a big trouble that we're becoming more and more dependent in the European Union on global players. And I know that the header is kind of challenges of the European AI ecosystem, and that's very German, I think, focusing on the challenges. But let me maybe first start with the strengths, because I think we have so much, and I think this whole room already shows the major strength of the AI ecosystem. So I think we have this growing ecosystem right now built around a very, very strong research pillar, and the research from Germany, from Fraunhofer, Max Planck, name it, DFKI, I know some of you are here, is really renowned across the world, and many are citing these researchers from Germany. So we're very strong when it comes to research, and I think that's one thing we can really be proud of and what we can build on. The other really big strength that we have is we have these major established companies and SMEs all across Germany. Especially in the pandemic, they've become more and more open towards AI, are looking towards AI and new technologies to become a main driver in the future also. And I think that's where we can kind of build on. And now kind of let me come to the challenges, because I know this is also the topic of today, and of course also one of the main things we discuss as the German AI Association. When I speak to all of our AI companies in the association, they all tell me, well, we have all of these established companies, but still we have big troubles working together with corporates, we have big troubles working together with SMEs. So what we have to foster, I think we have to step away from this theory of AI, that everyone has heard AI is a big topic, it's a future topic, but to really work on the use cases and how we can transport what AI really means for a company, how they can embed AI. And I think that's one thing we really have to work on right now as an ecosystem, on how we can explain AI and make it real for people that aren't really too deep in the topic and want to use AI. One other thing is, of course, when you look at research, but the numbers of kind of what we transfer into products, it's still very the numbers aren't big. So I think depending on the research we have here, we still have too few startups, for example, being established on these research results, and we really have to push forward as an ecosystem to help researchers gain this mindset and see their business models behind their research results. I think that's one thing we really have to aim for too, to kind of how we can establish services and products, and then maybe also like the last thing, and I know that's been in the press a lot these recent days, is kind of the issue of investment. So if you ask a lot of AI startups, they will say, we're looking for investment, we don't know how to find VCs that can help us and can finance us. And I think we've become very cautious of how to invest. I think we have this strength in Germany and the European Union in general, that we focus a lot on quality because of the lack of investment. So we're focusing a lot on how to build really, really good products that have like ethics by design or value by design, for example, implemented already. So I think that's a major strength. But we really have to see how we can scale these companies now, and that we need investment for. So I think, be kind of proud of the ecosystem and go out and say, hey, we have this high quality, we're just mainly underfunded, and our companies don't know how to work with clients. And I think that's what we as an ecosystem should push for, kind of explaining how companies, how also VCs can invest in AI.
Thanks, Vanessa. One thing I really would like to hear your answer on is, who is responsible to ensure that the brightest minds, thought leaders, decide to found research and stay in the European Union? So who's responsible for that? Is it the politics? Is it the academic sector? Is it maybe industry or society?
I think we all are. That's what makes it also difficult and why we have this discussion kind of going on is I think there's not one person responsible and there's not one thing you have to do that will change everything. So I think it's all down to all of us. It's down to building ecosystems. Your question was in the beginning kind of, do we need ecosystems? Yes, we definitely need ecosystems. We need places where everyone meets, where research can meet kind of the service side, the product side, and can learn from each other. So we have to kind of engage into this dialogue, be open towards new ideas. And I think if we engage and if we can really show how we use these strengths of good research, of good of established companies that need AI to kind of stand up in the future, then I think we can really be strong in the European Union. And you can see this, I think, through the last couple of years, that more and more people are coming back because they see what vibe is kind of growing in the European Union and how many inspiring people are here and how much can really be done for society, for climate, and kind of value by design, ethics by design as part of the product. And I think that's really part of our core USP in the European Union that makes lots of people come back and really decide, hey, the European Union is where I want to stay and build my company.
André, you want to ask?
Yeah, just to build one word on what Vanessa says, it's this word, I would like to float this word of interdisciplinarity, because today the biggest breakthroughs are coming from the conjunction between different fields. And if you think again about my example on space, but automotive is the same thing. I know NVIDIA, I don't want to make too much advertising for you guys. Is it a hardware company? Is it a software company? Is Tesla an automotive company or a software company? Is SpaceX a pure rocket? We have too much the tendency in Europe to think in silos. For example, in France, I'm trying to remove the word filière, which really means the industry branches. Because increasingly, if you are, again, to your log scale, if you are linear in your approach, you're not seizing what indeed everybody knows as a word, this exponential word. And that's where the opportunity is, because where do you find this interdisciplinarity and this diversity that we have in Europe? So that's why I'm also, like you, very optimistic, but that's why we need these bridges and these fora and these approaches, which are difficult. I mean, I used to be on the board of a Danish company. Before me, there were only 60-year-old Danish men. I love Denmark. It's a company called B&O, Bang & Olufsen, that you probably all know. I was the diversity. I don't look like diversity, really. But the fact that there was suddenly a French-German not speaking Danish, and that was 20 years younger, or 30 years younger at that time, that was already a huge change. But people who say diversity is easy are completely wrong. It's much easier because you go drink a beer with people that look like you. It's much less. You speak different languages. Already between AI and computer science, or between AI and hardware, people speak different languages. But if you get that together, the power of creation, of innovation is amazing.
I want to find out if there's a conflict between you, or if not, if I can make up some. You talked about technology transfer within an ecosystem, and that ecosystems are very important for tech transfer, so the collaboration between science, society, industry and politics for tech transfer. But isn't that a contradiction to every kind of DARPA model? So doesn't every DARPA-like model say what we need is a lot of funding, a lot of freedom, and the brightest minds of applied research? This has nothing to do with an ecosystem or technology transfer, or maybe technology transfer is done afterwards, after the technology is developed within the applied research. Okay.
Could I?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say something about back to this. Whose responsibility is it to keep people in Europe? I think I agree. It's everybody's. But also, I don't think it should be a goal that everyone stays in Europe. Migrating is great. The goal, as was mentioned before, is that more people are coming here than are leaving. So that would be great, and I do think that we are doing that through getting the message out about quality of life, and unfortunately that's partly by some of our competitors driving their own quality of life into the ground. But anyway, that's part of the reason I think it's important to be positive and to say, because the people who come here, often they don't come here by choice, maybe like because of a partner or something, and then all of a sudden they go, oh wow, I don't have to worry about health care, I don't have to, just the quality of life is better and I can get things done, and it's not what I had been told before. It's not that hard to get a company going. So I think there's some snowballing about that happening here now. On the other hand, definitely some people, when they go out to make their fortune or seek their fortune, just like, they could go into Bitcoin or they could move to California. And I think we are seeing a lot of ambitious people going where the gold rush is, the under-regulated gold rush. And I do think we need to worry about some of these companies are becoming, they have transnational talent, they have transnational data, they have transnational infrastructure, which they did build themselves. But I think they're becoming something like transnational utilities. And we need to make sure that not necessarily the people, but at least some of the revenue is being fairly and justly invested back into the places that provided the education and, and the data and everything else that helped them become what they were. So this is another reason that we need to work well with our governments and make sure that the governments, we're fortunate to live in the EU. Well, I chose to come here because of this strength, because I think it is a really good way to integrate national strengths together. But therefore that's able to compete and negotiate at this level. We're negotiating at the level, including that the United States government is not entirely sure how to get tax money out of those guys either. So we're actually cooperating with the US as well as with the rest of the world and trying to redesign that at a transnational level. So I just wanted to mention that on another piece.
So, as we are already running out of time, I would like to ask one last question to you all. We heard a lot of things that are good in our European AI ecosystem. We heard a lot of things where we are bad at. What if we want to change something? If we want to have more revenue, if we want to be more aligned to European values, if we want to have the brightest minds in Europe, so if we want to change anything in any of these sectors, how do we do it? Is it by consulting politics? Is it by making up smaller ecosystems that lead by example? What is the way to change the way the European AI ecosystem works?
Take one?
Okay, so one we'll just do a round. So I'll do it quickly in like 2 minutes and give up. I think it's really important, again, this diversity. So I think it's wonderful that you can approach all these different strategies, not the same person, but the corporations should absolutely be investing the time it requires to make sure that their governments are informed. But don't hesitate to move to another country, including another European country, if that's where you can get your business model bootstrapped first. And there is a lot of that. There is cycling between the different places that have maybe cheaper, great programming labor than versus somewhere with a higher rule of law that you might go when you're growing your company. So I think it's important that we have all these different sandboxes, including the different German states are trying different things. So I think there's a diversity of approaches, but the main thing is don't just think you can, at some point you're doing the programming all night, I get it. But it really is important to engage somewhere, to make sure that you aren't just complaining to yourself, but that you're actually getting your information, because there's a lot of people who are paid to help you, and they want to succeed, they want you to succeed. Everybody succeeds. It is not a zero-sum game. So absolutely try to figure out a good amount of time to spend engaging in communication with the people who could be helping things.
I would have one word, which is projects. I think we are on that one, we are way too French in Europe. We're always trying to find the big framework that will apply to everything. I think it's projects which get people together. And let's remember, the EU was founded on very concrete projects of putting coal and steel together. I think we need to go back there. Some of the discussions that you hear, and again, that's going to be a bit of anti-Brussels stance in Brussels, are so theoretical. Frankly speaking, good luck to those who will categorize high risk, medium risk, and small risk. And who has the capacity to judge that? And who will do it smartly enough that every 3 months it's updated because technology is going so fast. So common projects, and we have so many. Can we do face recognition, come back to my CCTV example, without centralized database? That would be an interesting project where on one side you do biometry, on the other side you are respectful. Can you do really fair AI? Can you do batteries without lithium? I mean, we are jumping from one dependency to Russia to another dependency to Australia. And think about the windmills that include 98% of rare earths from China. I mean, this lack of foresight is incredible, but on the other side, if you put very concrete projects and say only excellence counts, then suddenly you have the best brains from Europe, but also the others. They will rush back. And I think just one word on what Joanna said on this back and forth. I think that's why it's really a political project, is we need to have these passage from research to academia to business and politics. The other day I looked at all the director generals, and for those who know the Brussels bubble, you know the director general are much more powerful than the commissioner themselves, have now 25 years of age in the commission. That explains everything. We need to have these guys go out to a startup for 2 years or to academia for some year to just understand. And we as entrepreneurs, we also need to go sometimes in politics to realize that it's not as easy. So these back and forth, these would be two very concrete projects where we can move it forward.
Thanks, André. And last
Yeah,
one, you,
so I think I agree to that point with André that I think projects are really important. I said it earlier, like we have to work along of use cases and not see AI too theoretical. And I think especially SMEs and corporates, they get very lost because when I speak to them, they usually say, okay, we're still working on our AI strategy. And then 2 years later, they say the same thing. So nothing really changes. And I think the problem is that they see it as a too big thing and they just have to start. So I think the challenge is really seeing one point, seeing one project and seeing, okay, this is a use case that could help us. Okay, let's get going and let's learn in the process. So I think that's one way of definitely putting it. I think definitely to add to this is kind of the federal, cultural setting of the European Union and also of Germany is of course challenging because it works that way that we kind of have these small communities and all are kind of in their little bubble and no one really communicates. So I think setting on collaboration and also from a state perspective, not really on this, how would you put it in English? That in German it's like Gießkannenprinzip, so you're kind of setting on doing everything a little bit, but nothing really. So I think we have to set our minds to like this bigger moonshot project of working on like bigger projects as a society where we collaborate, I guess, on a federal level, because we won't get around that France and Germany and all our Baltic friends and so on, they all want to have part of the cake, so we can't say, okay, everything in AI will happen in Germany and you're happy to join, but come here. That won't work, so I think we'll have to think it on a federal perspective. But in Germany, the setup is often that we see each other too much of a as counterparts instead of working together. So I think we really have to share our ideas and see how we can work together on like a bigger picture and work towards a moonshot project so that we really have something of our own in the European Union.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Vanessa, thanks, André, and thanks, Joanna, for being our panelists. And thanks to Fabian and Veronica for making the Rise of AI 22 possible this year.